Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Kranich with the Connecticut Green Bank, and thanks for joining us tonight. We're just gonna, it looks like we still have some people signing on, so we'll give it another minute or two to let everyone get settled, and we'll get started in a few moments. Thanks. All right, it looks like we've got most of the people logged in, so we will get started. So again, my name is Ed Kranich. I'm a Senior Manager of Incentive Programs with the Connecticut Green Bank. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Emma Saavedra, Associate Manager of Incentives with the Connecticut Green Bank, and Rudy Stirk, who is on our marketing team. So as we get started, I just wanted to just get a couple of housekeeping items out of the way. So if anyone has questions, so this is a webinar, so we can't allow attendees to speak. It doesn't let attendees speak. But if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the question box, and we can get to them. We have some time set aside at the end to get to questions. We will make a copy of this presentation available, both the recording of the video and the slides themselves will be available. And we will circulate that within a few days. So let's get started. All right, so our agenda today is we're going to start with a poll, a quick poll of the attendees, and then we will go over an overview of what energy storage is, then what energy storage solutions is, the program that we're here to discuss today. Then we'll go over why a customer would want to get batteries for their home, benefits and costs, and how to get started. And then we'll close with questions. So again, please feel free to use the question box or the chat box, and we will get to them at the end. So we will start with a poll, and I think Rudy, there you go, okay. So there should be a poll up on the screen now for what brings you here today. If you're interested in pairing your existing solar PV system with storage, adding a new solar system and storage, energy storage on its own, or something else. And we'll give that a minute for some responses to come in. Okay. All right, so it looks like about half of you are interested in pairing your existing solar PV system with storage. And actually the rest kind of split between mostly other reasons. So interested to see what that is. So if anyone has any comments who voted other reason, feel free to put that in the chat. So next slide here. So in the event of an outage, what electrical devices are most important to you? So this is refrigerator, freezer, heating, cooling, medical devices, lighting, or entertainment. So I believe you can check more than one if I'm not mistaken. So we'll give this another 10 or 15 seconds, have the responses come in. Okay, it looks like a lot of refrigerator and freezer, so no surprises there. And some heating and cooling, a lot of heating and cooling. Entertainment, well pumps. Okay. All right, I think that's about close to everyone. But I think you can all see the results on the screen here. We have 92% of you selected refrigerator and freezer. So again, no surprises there, heating and cooling, not a lot on medical devices, and lighting and other entertainment. So, or other equipment, entertainment. So let's close this here. So, okay. So moving on, so what is energy storage? So it comes in many forms, from your laptops and phones and cars all have batteries, which is a form of energy storage. Your water heater is a form of energy storage because it heats up water now and stores it in the tank, and the energy is stored in that hot water. Even the gas tank in your car is a form of energy storage. So there's fuel that takes energy to create, and it becomes a portable source of energy to put in your car and run your engine on. Large-scale grid projects can even come in the form of massive underground caverns filled with compressed air or water that's pumped uphill and then run through a hydroelectric dam when it's needed. So energy storage is really a huge concept, but the reason behind it is because you want to store energy that's generated now and use it later. So typically it's when you'll store energy that you generate now because generating it now is more convenient, or you have more resources, or it's cheaper, and you want to use it later when you don't have it on hand. But again, why do we want to do this in Connecticut? Well, not on the subject of Connecticut, but Texas. Some of you may have read the headlines yesterday and the day before. There's been extreme heat in the Midwest, including in Texas. And the Texas power grid, which was in the headlines over last winter in 2021, for blackouts and big failures during a cold snap, they're kind of close to being in the same position now with this extreme heat. So everyone's at home, everyone's got their AC going, everyone's got their pool pumps going, and lighting and indoor entertainment. So really it puts a lot of strain on the grid. So kind of going to the next slide here. So the way that we use energy is not constant. We wake up, we turn the lights on, go to work, go to school, and as our daily activities and productivity increase, that puts a strain on the grid. Also, as the temperature rises during the day, especially in the summertime, around 3 p.m. when it's very warm, our air conditioners are working really hard. So this chart isn't specific to Connecticut, but it shows the basics of kind of where our power comes from. So at the bottom, we have base load, which in Connecticut is mostly nuclear. Nuclear doesn't release CO2 and other noxious fumes the same way that fossil fuels do. Next, we have intermediate power, which in Connecticut is mostly natural gas. And then on those hot summer days when everyone has their AC running, or like in Texas right now, you have fast peaking plants, which are usually only run for even just a few hours a year sometimes. They're very expensive to run, and they're also very dirty. They can run on something as kind of old and dirty as kerosene. So ESS was created to use energy on our grid more intelligently by charging batteries with solar or baseload or even intermediate power, and then discharging it at peak times instead of firing up these dirty peaker plants on those hot summer days or those very cold winter days. So that's kind of the aim of why we created this program, is because we want to stay out of that red zone at the top of this chart, and kind of smooth out these peaks and valleys in our energy use curve in the state. So what is battery storage, or battery energy storage? So these are the types of batteries that we're referring to when we say battery energy storage in this program. So Some of you might be familiar with off-grid solar PV if you've been around or kind of involved in the green movement for a while. So off-grid solar PV and backup power from a decade ago or more, you might think of these big banks of these, lead acid batteries, essentially an array of car batteries with like off-grid solar PV panels. Today's technology is much smarter. It has a lower footprint, a much smaller physical footprint, and it requires less maintenance. So these are batteries, they're shiny and silver and white like these ones from SunPower, Enphase, and Generac. They're much smaller, they're quieter, they require less maintenance, and some of them even look pretty good in your garage. So what we're not talking about here is things like portable, uninterruptible power supplies, sump pump batteries that are based on lead acid technology, and like I mentioned, these off-grid solar PV systems that, again, they're based on lead acid technology. They're not necessarily the smartest technology, and they're not the most energy dense. So why would you want energy storage for your home? So now that we've established kind of why we've launched the program and what types of energy storage we're talking about, we'll get into kind of why we're all here today. So you're wondering what battery storage can do for you. So first, it provides resiliency. This is a very personal reason, and it varies for everyone. Personally, I don't need too much when it comes to backup power, but some people have big families, medical needs, or you just need to keep appliances running. Like most of us want to keep our fridge running when the power goes out. Some people need to power electronics for work, and some people need to keep medication refrigerated, and some people might just be fine without power for a few days. I'm not one of those people. So next, many of you have solar PV installed, and batteries are a great way to pair with PV, since you can recharge your batteries in an outage with your panels, and you can charge your battery with PV and use it yourself. So it won't take you completely off the grid. You'll still be connected to the grid to keep your net metering and incentives and just the reliability of being on the grid, and also to claim battery storage incentives. You'll still have to be grid connected, but it does make you a bit more self-sufficient, especially in an outage. So you have this PV, this generator on your roof, but you need somewhere to put that energy so that you can use it kind of throughout the day and especially throughout the night. And third, this really only applies to people that have time of use rate, which is usually larger usage customers in Eversource territory or some customers in UI territory. But if you have a time of use rate, you can charge up your battery at night when electricity is cheaper, and you can use it during the day when electricity is more expensive. So that's a technique called time shifting. It's not too common in Connecticut. Other states like California have much more of their customer base on time of use rates, but those customers can benefit, and especially commercial and industrial customers who have demand charges and kind of a little bit more complex energy bills. They can save actually quite a bit by installing batteries to kind of shift their demand during the day. And finally, you can get reimbursed for your energy capacity when you're not using it. So we'll explain that in the next couple of slides about incentives. So, batteries can provide resiliency for you, and they can provide a little bit of independence for you. And the good part about this program is that you can get paid incentives for when you don't need it for those purposes. So what can batteries do for you? If you have enough of them, you can power pretty much anything. You can power your whole home if you want. But for most of us who will install, 10 to 50 kilowatt hours of energy, you want to consider the loads in your house using a chart like this one. So in this example, we have the low demand essentials like lighting, fans, charging small electronics, and definitely your refrigerator. And you could power those comfortably with a small battery system. It's a good idea to make a list of what's absolutely essential in an outage and a list of what is nice to have. And that will set your expectations and your budget based on that type of a chart. So budget and expectations are two very important terms when you're making this kind of chart, because we all want to be able to run our central air on a hot day without power, but that's a lot of batteries to buy, and it's very expensive, and you may not even need it that often. So just something to consider there. So right in the middle of this chart here, we have things like the electric stove, the water heater and heating, if you use mini splits. These are appliances that still use a lot of electricity, but if you don't use them very often, or you don't use them very often, but they can be pretty important. In the next slide, we have a chart that can help you decide sort of how many batteries you may need to power your home. So there's a lot of info on here, and we'll definitely make this available so you can use it. But this basically just kind of takes your average home appliances and breaks out the load in watts, or the average load for something like a refrigerator or central air. The load kind of varies depending on when it's kicked on and when it's not running. But this is based on the energy that you can pull from a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery system. So this list here will show how many hours of service you can get from that battery for that one device. So once you start mixing and matching devices, of course, that service service time will go down. But again, this is a good reference, a good way to sort of figure out what you need when you are thinking about how many batteries you want to install and kind of how to pair that with a solar PV system. So the list continues here. Again, we'll make this available so you can kind of look it over on your own time. So now into battery storage versus generators. This is a big question that a lot of people have. When you're looking for backup power, you're going to definitely run into the idea of, why don't I just get a generator? So first we'll go over the benefits. So we have the portable generator. Benefit, obviously, it's pretty cheap. It's pretty readily available. You can go to Home Depot now and get one. Unless there's a big storm coming, they're pretty easy to find. They're also portable. You can just keep it in your shed and, just take it out when you need it. Next, we have the big standby generators. They have a high output, so you can install one just kind of tucked away in your backyard. It looks nice, has a high output, a lot of power, and it can power your whole home. It doesn't need to store that power, or it doesn't need to store any of that energy, but that energy has to come from burning natural gas or propane, which you may either have to have a hookup for, or you'd have to have propane delivered. It's nice if you already have fuel at your home, but it can be an added cost. The other nice thing is that they're on standby. So these big generators can just flip on once it senses that the power has gone out and automatically transfer and disconnect you from the grid. So they're very easy to operate. And finally, batteries. They're silent, no fuel or emissions. And if you already have PV, or if you want to get solar PV, you can store and use your own energy. And they are also on standby all the time, same as a standby generator. And of course, incentives are available for these, so that's a nice added benefit. So onto the drawbacks for a portable generator. You have to buy and transport fuel. They're very loud and they smell. They have emissions. Of course, there's toxic gases that come out of the tailpipe, which, if you're not careful, it can be very dangerous. You have to keep them outside. So, in a storm, it's just kind of hard to deal with. If you're in an ice storm, you have to take it outside and start it up and make all that noise. It does require maintenance because it has moving parts and it's an engine, and it's not on standby. Next, with the standby generator, it does have a higher lifetime cost, mainly because there aren't incentives available for it. You have to buy the equipment and then you have to pay for fuel every time you use it. Standby generator requires professional installation and possibly plumbing if you have to get it hooked up to a natural gas line. Permitting involved, requires maintenance, and of course it's not portable. And drawbacks of batteries, because we're being fair here, does have a high upfront cost, does require professional installation, and it does require interconnection and permitting. And it's definitely not portable either. So now on to the benefits beyond backup, so incentives. So a lot of information on this screen, but as we discussed earlier, there are incentives available for homeowners who want to install battery storage at their home. And they're split into two categories. There's upfront for passive dispatch and performance-based for active dispatch. Our upfront incentive levels will go in steps, similar to solar rebates, if you're familiar with that, based on the total approved capacity. We expect these steps to be active through the first 3 years of the program's operation, approximately 1 step per year as things ramp up. So right now we're in this this first step here, this capacity block, 10 megawatts, and these are the incentive rates available for homeowners. So it varies depending on whether you're standard rate customer, an underserved customer, which is those who reside in a DECD distressed municipality, which there is a list available that's created by the State Department of Economic and Community Development. But there's about 27 towns that are in the underserved community list, and just simply being in one of them, you can get an added incentive for your system. And then there's low income, which there's a little more of a qualification process for that, but it is open to anyone who qualifies through any contractor. So there's no special hoops other than just identifying yourself as someone who is low income. And we do have criteria. I can make that available for how to know if you are low income and qualified for that elevated incentive. So essentially, if you participate in this program and you would like to get an upfront incentive, what you do is you make your battery available for a period of 10 years. During the summertime, the battery would be dispatched during the daytime during weekdays, non-holiday weekdays, for 3 months. And at that time, it would basically just offset your home's demand. So the battery will discharge to be used in your home between 3 and 8 p.m. So in exchange for doing that for 10 summers, you'll get an upfront incentive. So that's a total amount off your total bill. And I have a few examples of the calculations a couple slides down. So the next type of incentive, and you can do both, is the performance incentive, which is just based on certain events. So maybe like today or tomorrow, it's going to be pretty hot. There are what we call active events, where when the demand on the grid is very high, usually related to it being very hot out and people running their air conditioning, is that your battery will be called on by the utility kind of at a special time on shorter notice, and it would be discharged and it would go out to serve the grid. So like I showed in that chart a few slides back, it's to kind of avoid those really sharp peaks in our state's demand curve. So when it starts to peak up, we'll deploy those batteries to kind of smooth it out by using power that's already been stored in a battery. So here's kind of a visual example of what passive dispatch would look like. So again, I said that it's non-holiday weekdays in the summer, and that's June, July, and August, between 3 and 8 p.m. So your battery would discharge up to 80% of its capacity to meet your home's on-site demand during these days, except for Wednesday here. This would be a holiday, so it wouldn't count. And then when you start working in the active dispatch events, active dispatch will always override a passive event, and it can even override weekends and holidays as well too. So active dispatch is a little more, it's a little more open in when it can be called, but the customer does always have the ability to decline it if you don't want to. So if there's an active event being called and you don't want to participate in it, you can opt out. Through your battery vendor, you can opt out of that event. You will have the opportunity to do that, but you just basically wouldn't get an incentive for that particular event. So you would be, it would bring down your total seasonal incentive amount. So you can opt out, but it'll just lower how much you get paid at the end of each season. So here are some examples that can show kind of what the financials will look like for a couple different size battery systems. So here's a small battery system. This is a 5 kilowatt, 13.5 kilowatt hour model. We have up here this just an estimated cost of $12,000. A standard rate customer would get $2,700 just off the top. Underserved customer would be $4,050, and low income would be $5,400 off the top for that upfront incentive. The performance-based incentive, as I said before, it will depend every season depending on how much you participate. So I just put these in as 90% and leaving a little bit of wiggle room for the battery not wanting to discharge all the way down to zero, because some batteries don't like to do that. They might be pre-programmed from their manufacturer to not go all the way down to zero. So I put in a 90% depth of discharge, 90% participation rate. So assuming that the customer is participating in, we'll say, about 80 to 90% of events, and every event is 3 hours. You can see in this list here, in the first 5 years, every summer, you could get a check for $729 every summer, $91 every winter, assuming that there's events both in summer and winter. And then the total of that would come out to about $6,470 nominal total for those 10 years of participation. So you can see that the performance rates change a little bit in the 6th year, in years 6 through 10. So these are your kind of seasonal payouts for making your battery available and using it in the performance incentive program. So just a couple more examples here. We have the medium-sized system, which is just twice as big as the last one. You can see that the incentive rate goes up for a standard customer. The incentive is capped at $7,500 for all residential customers. So when you get into these larger size systems, it does kind of hit up against that cap. But the performance incentive is not capped. So in this case, $25,000 system, you'd get about $5,400 off or more for different types of customers. And the total 10-year PBI estimate is about $13,000, assuming full participation. So these incentives can be pretty good, especially if you're comparing them to something like a standby generator. And finally, this is a very large system. We don't see too many of these so far, but in this case, all of them kind of butt up against this cap. But the performance incentive for 10 years, again, not capped, so it can be pretty high in exchange for buying, a pretty large and expensive battery system. So how to get started? So moving on to our plan to kind of roll out here. So to participate in the program, there's more information, energystorageCT.com. You can check kind of how far into the program we are, how far into the current incentive step we are. On this page, if you were to go right now, you'll see that we're, I think, less than 20% in to our 10 megawatt capacity for residential customers. So there's plenty of room. There's plenty of megawatts left at the current rates. We have a find a contractor page, so you can find a contractor in your area. We always recommend talking to at least 2 or 3, get a few quotes, take your time, do your research. If you have a solar contractor that you've worked with in the past who maybe installed your solar panels for you, talk to them. I would try talking to them first, especially if you have a lease or a PPA. Make sure that you're not running afoul of any rules associated with your lease or PPA, because they own the equipment. So you just want to make sure that you're not interfering with anything that they've installed and that they own. But it's always a good start to talk to who installed your solar. If they're not already on the list, feel free to encourage them to join. We're taking applications, and we've got a few dozen contractors in the program, but we always have room for more. So again, do your research, think about your essential devices, think about how much you really want to pay for having backup power, how much it's worth to you. And if you haven't done so already, get a HES audit, because we do require that all customers participate in the HES program, the Home Energy Solutions program. So you can get an energy audit for $50 or $0 for certain customers, to kind of, I think especially in the case of having battery backup, you want to make sure that your electric load will be as low as it can go before you get battery storage. And finally, for the eligible technologies, we have a list here. So you can check to see if the equipment that you're interested in is on this list. Right now, for residential customers, we have Generac, PowerCell, SunPower, SunVault, Enphase, Encharge. And there are a few others, Solarc, inverters, Fortress batteries, and home grid batteries as well. So I know that was a lot of information, a lot of talking. So we will pause here to take a look at questions. And Emma, if there are any questions, we can get started. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to use the chat, the question box, and we will get to them. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ed. Okay, so let's get started with questions. A lot of good questions came in. So we will start with the most commonly asked question. What is the status of the Tesla Powerwall eligibility in the program?
That's a great question. And yes, that's definitely the most commonly asked. So we have been talking to Tesla for months at this point. So we know that there are a lot of Tesla customers out there, people who have been waiting to install a battery. I have regular discussions with Tesla. I try to put as much pressure as I can on them without being too forceful. But they have told us that they plan to apply to this program in July or August. We're halfway through July, so I will send out my weekly nudge to them. We can only do so much to force them to apply. But once they're in, once they've applied, and once we've looked at their application, we know that they've participated in other utility programs. We know that they're capable of it. So once their application comes in, it's really just kind of a matter of getting it approved, and then once they're approved, we can release a whole lot of applications in the queue. So I know it's hard to keep hearing that answer. It's a waiting game, and it just kind of requires patience. I'm very impatient, and I would really like them to apply as soon as possible. But if if customers, if you want to talk to your Tesla rep, or if there's anyone that you want to kind of comment through, feel free to do so. But we are doing our best to kind of encourage Tesla to join. So I know it's not really the best answer, but we're kind of doing everything we can.
Great. Hopefully we will receive that application soon. And again, that will be updated. You can always select that link for our eligible technologies to see if the Tesla Powerwall is added there. And I would just recommend checking back at the end of July or August to see if that's the case. Okay, so another question here is that somebody has a leased solar system. The vendor says that they don't have enough panels to add battery storage. Is there an option for a solar generator that only kicks in during power outages? So I'm assuming if there's a battery that only kicks in during power outages.
I'm sorry, could you ask that question again? I didn't catch it.
Yeah, so this person has a leased solar system, and their contractor says that they don't have enough panels to add battery storage. Is there an option for a solar generator that only kicks in during power outages? Okay. I'm assuming they still want to tie their battery to solar. They just don't have enough solar. generation.
So, okay. So without seeing, how big of a system you have and kind of what the production is, it sounds like your contractor is saying that you don't have enough solar panels to like fully charge a battery, either because it's too small or, it wouldn't be enough for you. So your option in that case would be to either add solar panels, but to use your solar panels that you currently have, if you wanted to just use them during a power outage, like you're saying, you would need special equipment. It is possible with a certain type of inverter to have your solar panels power like an outlet. I know that SMA made an inverter that does that, but generally, without changing your equipment, and especially if you don't have this special type of inverter, no, you can't power anything from solar during an outage, unfortunately.
All right. So somebody had a question. Does the passive and active dispatch shorten the life of the batteries?
Mm-hmm. So that's a valid concern. So we do require that all batteries that participate in the program have at least a 10-year warranty, and that all the contractors offer a 10-year workmanship warranty. So cycling a battery does, shorten its life. That's how it's set up. We expect batteries to be able to fully participate in this program, for 10 years. But using both active and passive together, it's not additive because the active dispatch overrides passive events, and it's only for really mainly for the summer season and a couple times during the winter season. So for a good at least 3/4 of the year, your battery is not cycling heavily in the summertime as it is in the summertime. So it is still early. We haven't seen a year or multiple years of this program working on any batteries, but it's not a major concern that it would run the battery down before its estimated useful life.
Great, very important to note that. And another question here, how does one opt out of the active dispatch event? And can you opt out for a season, or can you do it just for a weather event?
Mm-hmm. So that's a good question. Does the second part of that on a weather event? And actually, I think I didn't mention this, but we do have kind of a contingency with any events in this program, is that if the utilities call a weather event, which for them it's any storm that has the possibility to knock out power. If they call that weather event, it would cancel any planned passive events or even active events if they were already being planned. So when there's a storm, our priority is to make sure that you have a battery that's charged and ready to use in case the power goes out. So we would not prioritize dispatching it to the grid over giving you backup power. So that's a very important part that actually I did leave out before. I'm sorry, Emma, could you read the first part of that question again?
Yes, they were wondering if you can opt out of an entire active dispatch season.
Mm-hmm. So you cannot opt out of an entire season at a time. You can opt out of individual events only. So you would be notified by your battery vendor when an active event is coming, and then you would have to act, before the event started to opt out of it.
Okay. And is there an expiration for the HES audit?
No, there is not for this program.
Okay, great. Simple question. Okay, and another question is, how are we compensated for participating in active dispatch? Is it a credit on the utility bill or an actual payment?
It is an actual payment. It's a check, and the designated payee, whether it's you or whether it's like a third-party system owner, would be paid at the end of the season in the form of a check.
Great. And what is the average life expectancy of these battery systems? So I think you noted this quickly before, but just to emphasize that.
So the expectation is that these systems will be able to perform for 10 years. Beyond that, it's probably going to depend on the individual technology. Although all these batteries are considered, quote, lithium ion, there is kind of some nuance between the different lithium technologies. So I would say it's best to talk to either your contractor or salesperson about to look at either the spec sheets or read up from the manufacturer on what the expected lifespan is for a particular model.
Okay, great. And a question here, does the Green Bank provide low interest loans to purchase batteries?
Good question. We have the Smarty loan program. Again, using Green Bank financing is not required, or it doesn't change your incentive at all in this program. But if we do have the Smarty bundle, which just released, I think a week ago, and that Smarty bundle is a low interest offer for folks who are installing multiple measures. In this case, it includes battery storage. So if you're doing battery storage in PV or battery storage in insulation or heat pumps or something like that, you can pair those and you can get a low interest loan. I believe it's $299.
Yeah.
Is it $299? Okay. But you can find more information about that at ctgreenbank.com/smarte.
Awesome. And somebody was wondering, is there a place where I can find data on number and duration of events?
Yeah, actually, we have estimates here. Let me jump back a few slides. Do I have this? Maybe at the end. Okay. Okay, here it is. Yep. So this is the expectation. We can't make promises when it comes to active events because we don't know what the grid will look like in each season. But the expectation is that for the upfront passive dispatch, here are the events that will be pre-planned. So it's just all non-holiday weekdays, about 60 of them, June, July, and August, 5 hours a day from 3 to 8 p.m. But many of those will be overridden by these active events, of which we expect to have 30 to 60 of them in the summertime and 1 to 5 in the winter. So the number of events doesn't necessarily have a major impact on your incentive. It's really the number of events that you participate in versus the total number of events. So even if we only call one event and you participate in it fully, then you would get the full incentive, the full performance incentive for that season. If we have 100 events and you participate in half of them, then you would get half of the incentive.
Great. Okay, so somebody was wondering if there are any government incentives coming down to help with regular home customer installs. So are there any federal incentives on top of this local government one?
Yep. So there are no rebates for storage specifically. However, and this is a place where you kind of have to tread lightly, is if you're installing solar and storage, or if you're installing storage that's charged by solar, then that equipment is part of your solar PV system, and that equipment can qualify if you qualify for the federal tax credit. However, if the battery is not being charged by solar, then it would not qualify. So I say that with the caveat that, of course, I'm not a tax accountant and we don't work for the IRS. So always double check, triple check, do your research, and make sure that you're abiding by the rules of the federal investment tax credit for renewable energy systems. And if you want to look it up, the form is IRS form 5695, and you can find kind of all the information on how to qualify for that on that form.
Okay. And somebody asked, who monitors the battery's health? Is that the contractor? Is that the homeowner?
So the battery's health, I'm assuming that's referring to like its total capacity, after discharges. So each battery vendor, each approved battery vendor, so SunPower, Generac, Enphase, they do have their own software, and they do program the battery kind of in their own way each, to both meet the demands of the program, but also to work within their parameters of how they want their battery to work. So we don't intend on having any insight into that, into like how a battery has aged necessarily. I mean, I think we can tell when it comes to some of our data kind of metrics over time. But as for like a real time kind of looking into the health of your battery, I would consult with the company that makes your battery for information on that.
Great. Okay. A question here: after passive or active dispatch, will the battery recharge from the grid or your solar PV?
It depends how it's programmed. If you have solar PV, then it should be charging mostly from the solar PV. If you have a standalone battery, then it would just charge from the grid.
Great. And then this question came up twice. Can you define an event again? So distinguish again the difference between passive and active events.
Sure. Let me jump back to this one. So passive event is something that's just pre-scheduled. Your battery is already pre-programmed to discharge up to 80% of its capacity over this 5-hour term. And this is already in its software. It knows that if it's a non-holiday weekday in the summertime, it will do this, and it'll discharge to meet your home's demand. And if an event is called, we'll call these active dispatch events. That would be in the form of the utility, we'll say Eversource, saying, hey, tomorrow's going to be a really hot day. We're forecasting that the grid usage is going to be very high. It's there's going to be a lot of people with air conditioning running or people inside. So we're forecasting that. So we're going to call this event, say on Monday the 2nd. We're going to call it in the afternoon, scheduled for 2 to 5 p.m. on Tuesday. So it will send out a signal. The utility will send out a signal that's calling this event. Usually we expect it to be about 24 hours advance notice. Could be more, could be less, but I think the goal is to have it be at least 24 hours. So they would call that event, and you would be notified as a customer to say, hey, we're going to cancel your passive dispatch tomorrow on Tuesday the 3rd, and instead we're going to do a 3-hour active dispatch from 2 to 5 p.m. So at that point you could say, okay, fine, we'll do that. Or you can opt out of it and you can not do it. And of course, that would hurt your performance incentive. But you would know that that event was called, and you wouldn't really have to do anything if you wanted to participate in it. It would just be called, and then it would just happen. So by this point, at 5 p.m., your battery would be discharged fully, and then with what little sunlight is left for the rest of the day, it'll charge, and then charge in the next morning as well.
Okay, and right into that subject, if you had a power outage at your house and you were using the battery to power your home, would the passive dispatch still occur?
No. So if there's an outage, so in the case of an outage, or in the case of we'll say in the case of a storm event that's called by the utilities, all of these events would all be canceled because they're expecting there to be a storm, so they would want you to have power on hand just in case you needed it. If there's some, excuse me, if there's something like, say a car accident or something like that that knocks out a power line to your home and you don't have power, and that's something that wasn't forecasted by the utility because it's not a weather event, then you would be, we'll say non-compliant for a planned event. But we do allow some wiggle room for things like that. So, if there's some kind of like an accident or event that makes you need to use power and it's not something that we anticipated from weather, you won't be like punished or anything, or as long as it doesn't happen all the time.
Okay, and a question here, can an electric car charging system be added to the battery system?
So can you charge an electric car off of your car or off of your backup battery system on your house? I think is the question.
Yes. Yeah.
It would depend on the battery itself, because it would either end up charging it either very slowly at a trickle, or your car wouldn't be able to get enough power to charge itself during that time. So it kind of just depends on the type of charger you have and the type of battery you have and how many batteries you have. But a battery can power anything if you have enough of them, or if you have enough inverter power to do so.
Okay. And there's a question here. What is Eversource or UI's liability should the battery be damaged?
Damaged, I'm assuming you mean by overuse or something like that. That's a good question. I'm not sure if I if I have an answer for that. But if we could take that down as a question to follow up on.
Okay, great.
We can pass that to Eversource and UI to see what they would say.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a question here about the upfront incentives being in the terms of dollar per kilowatt versus dollar per kilowatt hour. And why did we decide to go with the value we did?
So the upfront incentive is based on kilowatt hours. So in this case, this is $200 times 13.5, which is 2,700. So the incentive is based on kilowatt hours, and the total capacity in the program is based on kilowatts. The incentive being based on kilowatt hours is because the kilowatt hours is really kind of the main source. It's kind of like the amount of fuel that you're paying for, and the kilowatts is kind of like the size of the pipe to get that fuel out. So I mean, for choosing the capacity of the program based on kilowatts, it was just a choice that we made, early on. But the incentive, I think, the incentive should be based on the amount of kilowatt hours because it's the amount of energy that we're eventually, excuse me, the amount of energy that's eventually being deployed to the grid at any time. I hope that was clear.
Okay, and we have is how long does it take? Yes, that was clear. How long does it take for batteries to recharge after a dispatch event?
It's going to be a product. If you're talking about a battery connected to a PV system, it's going to be a product of the equipment that you have. So your solar inverter, how much power can possibly run through it from your solar panels, and also even things like the direction of the system, the time of year. So sizing batteries to a PV system is kind of it's a very site dependent calculation. So your design is really going to depend on what your solar PV system looks like and how much energy it can put out at any given time.
All right, great. And we'll leave on this one last question. Was this webinar recorded and will it be available?
Yes and yes. And we can send that out. It's today, Tuesday, definitely by the end of the week, we'll have a recording posted online.
Okay, great. And if we did not get to your question today, if you go to our website, energystoragect.com, under the home section, you will find a spot for an inquiry submission. So you can just submit one there. Our website also has a homeowner FAQ. If you want to look there, that's a good resource of a lot of our frequently asked questions.
All right. Thanks, Emma, and thanks everyone for joining and for your questions. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and hope you all have a good night. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much.